Everyone, and welcome to Sisters in Crime Atlanta's Off the Shelf, hosted by our own Dawn Gepfer. Today, we welcome Judy Penz Sheluk, who is coming to us from Gooley, Ontario. I think I got that right. And is a best-selling author. She has two series right now. One is the Glass Dolphin series, which is very much a cozy series, and the Marketville series, which is a cold case series. She also is the editor of 3 anthologies that are mystery and suspense mixes, ranging from humor to almost noir, I would say. And they have been very well received. Judy started her writing career when she hung it up being a credit manager and started writing for magazines. And through that journey, she started these two series and has been very successful with that. And so we'd like to welcome Judy to Off the Shelf, and I'll turn it over to Dawn Gepfer.
Thank you, Lance, and good morning, everybody. Judy, welcome. We are really excited to chat with you today. And as a reminder, this program is geared towards our reader audience, and we're going to do our best not to have any spoilers because our goal is to intrigue our readers enough so that they go get your book off the shelf and put it in their hands and they actually read it. But we're really excited to chat with you today because there is a lot to talk about when it comes to you and your writing career. So what I want to start with, and I always kick this off with this question, is I like for our authors to give us their backstory. And what I'm looking for here is who you are and who you were before you became a professional writer, and how that life led to you writing today.
Okay, well, I'm really not that exciting, but so I've always written stories in my head. I thought everyone did that, really, from the time I was a kid. Like before I could write things down, I'd have like a little story in my head. Going to school, I'd think about the story, and then sometimes I'd finish it before I got to school and sometimes not. So then on the way back from school, I'd finish it in my head. And I just always did that and thought that that's what people did, write stories in their head. And it wasn't until I was married, probably somewhere in my 30s, and my husband was an engineer, so very, very black and white kind of guy, right? No gray areas for him. And I had this long commute. I was commuting from a small town called Holland Landing to Toronto every day. And so it was especially long that day. I don't know, weather or something. And I got back and I said, well, thank heavens I had my story that I've been working on in my head. And he looked at me like, you write stories in your head? Like, who is this person that I married, right? So I was like, yeah, you don't do that. And he goes, no, like people don't do that. I was like, really? And he said, you should write them down. So I thought, yeah. Anyway, bless his heart, he ended up buying me a writing workshop course, a 10-week course with a local author that is quite well known in Canada, Barry Dempster, more of a poet, but if you're not into poetry, you might not know him, but he's been the recipient of many awards. Anyway, Barry was terrific for really getting me started, and he was really worked as a mentor for me. Which was great, you know. So I did that. And at the same time, I think, as Lance mentioned, I worked in the corporate world. I was a manager for many years. And, you know, I did well in the corporate world. I just didn't like it very much. I'm not really good with the 9-to-5 existence. I never understood why you had to work from 9 to 5. Why couldn't you just, you know, if you were more effective at 8 o'clock at night, why not work at 8 o'clock at night? But, you know, they didn't seem to see it that way. So I had to suck it up. But anyway, it was like, I guess 2003, I'd done, a couple of courses and taken some more courses and continued to hone my writing. Anyway, the company I worked for was downsizing. And so they had said, well, we're going to try to keep your job, but we'll keep it maybe 3 days a week and see what happens. And I thought, I don't want to do that. So I said, you know what? I don't want to do that. So why don't you just, I'll train people on different things, and then you give me a severance package and I'll go away. So they did that, which was great. So that severance package allowed me to sort of pursue a freelance writing career. And I gave myself a year, right? I said, okay, let me just try this for a year and see if I can make some money. Not the money I was making as a manager, but some money, And so I did that. And within the year, I was making almost as much as I had as a manager. It was just incredible, just incredible to me. But I think 2003 was a good time to break in. Today, you would never, ever have that kind of success because, print media is all but dead. And at that time it was thriving. So, I kind of carved out a niche, antiques and collectibles, and also home building, just two very different areas, but areas that I was interested in, and did really well. Became an editor of a magazine and that kind of thing. And then 2012, I went to a conference in Toronto called Bloody Words. It's no longer in existence, sadly, but it was a biannual thing. And I listened to authors that I admired talking about their work. And I thought, when I left there, I thought, well, how hard could it be to write a book? I'm going to write a book. So anyway, turned out it was much harder than I thought. But that really, sort of inspired me to start. So that, I guess the first book was A Hangman's Noose for the Glass Dolphin series. And that got picked up in 2014 and published in 2015. And since then, I've got 7 books published in the 3 anthologies. So, and I gave up the freelance stuff. 2018 was my last year of doing that. I sort of gradually removed myself from contract after contract until I was free. And so it's kind of a long journey to get here, but it's I think the journalist stuff, the freelance stuff, really helped me to be a writer. I know what it's like to write on deadline. There's no like, you don't have it ready for tomorrow's paper. Okay, next week's fine. No, none of that. So I've gotten used to deadlines, really good with that. And I think the credit manager and the accounting experience has really given me a sense of business, right? I understand that publishing is a business, and I treat it like that. I don't treat it like a hobby. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm successful, and why some people aren't, is because you can't look at it as anything but a business. You really have to view it that way if you want to get anywhere, kind of thing. Well, I guess you don't have to, but you'll end up probably losing your shirt. So what good's that? Unless you got lots of shirts.
Well, let's go back a little bit earlier,
Sure.
because you touched on something that I'm very, very curious about. So you had a career, you initiated a career in accounting and finance. So is that what you studied? Or like, how did you, that's such a methodical and structured education and work environment. And yet you seem to have the whole time, because you said you were thinking of stories in your head. So the whole time you're being very structured and methodical. Over here, you're being quite creative in your mind.
Yeah.
So what happened here?
Well, so when I was in high school, I knew that I wanted to take journalism. I wanted to go to a school in Toronto called Ryerson. It's since changed its name. But that's where they're very, very well regarded for journalism programs. And so I really, that's what I wanted to do. My father died when I was 14. My mom was clueless. She was 40. My dad was 41. He had cancer.
Oh,
and so the money just wasn't there, really. And my mother didn't really support the journalist thing. She was a banker.
there you go.
And
My mom
so,
was an accountant, same thing.
yeah, so she just did not get it at all. And so she was like, no. So anyway, I ended up getting a job at Liberty Mutual Insurance, where I met my husband. And so that was in the credit department. I got a job as a file clerk. I mean, I didn't even know how to type at the time. I mean, they sent me to typing class. So I can't believe I got the job. But anyway, I got the job right out of high school, this file clerk job. And so, but through there, they really believed in me and sort of put me through different courses and that kind of thing. And I went to night school and got a degree in business administration. And so I worked full time, and then I was living on my own. I moved to another town from Toronto. And so I went to night school and got my degree and worked full time. So there was really, during those years, there was certainly no time to do writing, right? I'd probably still at the time, had thought up stories, but really I was pretty busy doing other things, not to mention the fact that I was, in my 20s and, like to go to the bars and stuff. So, there was that too, right?
Yes. Priorities.
There were priorities. And the Liberty Mutual gig was great because I ended up becoming the youngest manager in the history of the company. And to be a female manager then was really kind of a big deal. So that part, and I traveled quite a bit for them. They had offices throughout Canada, and I'd get to travel there, and their main office was in Boston, so I would go there. I think I mentioned that I was in Atlanta for a period of time. So that was really kind of an exciting time for me. But everything sort of comes to an end at some point, and they ended up getting acquired by another company. Anyway, I ended up leaving there and having a succession of jobs that I didn't particularly care for until the eventual downsizing. And again, if it hadn't been for my husband, like, he really kind of was the one that said, start, you're not happy doing this. I mean, I made good money, but I wasn't happy doing it. I became less and less happy as time went on. And so he was like, try something else. You've always said you wanted to write, see what happens, see where it takes you. So, the first course with Barry was great. And then I took an online course with Gotham Writers, writingclasses.com, and I got like a fiction writing certificate with them. And so, through all of that, and then the magazine work, it kind of fell into that. Like the day that I heard that I might get downsized, I had sent in an article as it was a school assignment actually through Gotham. And it was writing about antique clocks. My husband collected antique clocks at the time. He doesn't anymore, but he did at the time. And so I did a bunch of research, and then I wrote this article, and it got picked up by this antiques magazine in Canada. And so I got paid $75 for that. So when I got home, I said to Mike, I said, like, it's an omen here. Like, I'm going to lose my job, and I made $75. He's like, hold on. So I'm not sure that's such an omen, but okay. So anyway, but I really do believe it was kind of a sign saying it's okay to follow this new path. And so I did, and it's worked out great. I mean, I'm much happier. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I work hard. I probably work 7 days a week, right? I'm a golfer, so in the summer I take, time to do that. But, winters in Canada are long and harsh. And so there's lots of time to write. And I tend to work 7 days a week, but I don't work 9 to 5 anymore. I work whenever the heck I want. Sometimes it's 9 to 5, but mostly it's not. So, yeah, so that's sort of how I got to where I am. But yeah, you just never know, right? I think the one thing I will tell anybody is just who you are at 25 is not who you are at 45 or 55 or whatever. Like, it's never too late to start a new path in life. Right.
I think that is excellent. And I know I am a reader. And one of the reasons I'm a reader, and I'm a part of Sisters in Crime, which is primarily my co-members here. They're all writers. There's a few of us that are readers, but the majority of us are writers. And I have such a passion for it. I really do. I enjoy the organization very, very much. But I always kind of say, well, I'm a reader. I'm not a writer. But the truth is, I would love to be a writer. But what you just said about the timing and how much my job takes of me, even when I'm not at work. We've been on calls before, and my boss is sending me messages, call me as soon as you can. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Saturday, leave me alone. But it's just constant. And so I think to myself a lot, like what you said, when this is all over, when I can walk away, is maybe that is when I'll dabble. Maybe that'll be my second career. And I'm really looking forward to that opportunity. So it's very encouraging to hear what you have to say about it. Now, real quick, before we continue, for those of you that are in the audience, a couple of things. Number one, if you want to ask a question, please do. This is very interactive. We encourage audience participation. So please speak up or put your question in the chat. Angela is monitoring the chat for us, and so she'll bring it up and or raise your hand. We definitely want you to participate in this conversation with Judy today. So we have heard a great story about your life leading up to writing. And one of the things that I noticed when I was doing research on you and your books is it's going on 20 years, because you said it was 2003 when you started to dabble. Okay, so we're 20 years in. And I did a timeline of your publications, and it is amazing to me. And if I counted correctly, there's 14 books to your credit, where either you're a contributor, the anthologies, your series. And so what I came up with was in 2014, you participated or you contributed to a couple of, like, one was a cookbook.
Yeah. There was a couple of cookbooks. Lois Winston, who's a terrific, she's got a terrific Anastasia Pollock series. If you haven't read it, it's terrific. Sort of like, I would call it almost a crusty cozy, because she definitely uses some bad language, but it's quite clever. Anyway, she started this cookbook thing, trying to give people like a little bit of an publicity. And so I submitted to two of her, she had two cookbooks, and I submitted to both, which is quite funny because I'm actually a terrible cook. So those are, like, if you get those books, those are the only two things I know how to make. That's why I'm just like brutal. My husband will attest to that. Like, he's like, oh gosh, she's cooking today. Oh no. So that, and then the anthologies, those were really my big break, quite frankly. Sisters in Crime Toronto did a call out for an anthology, and it was blind judged, so that was great. And so I sent, and I'm always more appreciative of those, because especially when you're unknown, right? Like, you figure if you're known, you're going to get maybe picked up by something, but if you're unknown, it's because, you know, if they pick it up, it's because they liked it, right? So that was really exciting for me. They had a book launch at a bookstore in Toronto called Sleuth of Baker Street, which is a fabulous bookstore in Toronto. And so I went there, and I just felt like an author. I remember I bought this new top, and it was just so exciting, right? And that's one of the reasons, honestly, that launch. And then at the same time, I was in World Enough in Crime. They both launched within a month of each other, both at Sleuth. And it was just so exciting for me. And honestly, that was the main reason I started the anthologies, because I wanted to give back. I wanted to give other people that sense of excitement, right? Your first publication, it's wonderful. I mean, I don't even think I made money on either one of them, but it didn't matter. It was like validation, somebody saying, yeah, you can do this, And so it was really, really exciting for me. That it just really sort of gave me the confidence to go on.
And when you did segue from the anthologies into actually writing a full, a novel, a mystery, you started with Marketville? Was
No,
that your?
I started with Glass Dolphin, and that
the
premise there is antique shop owner and freelance journalist. And because I was the editor of New England Antiques Journal, so I learned a lot about antiques in that role. And then I had the freelance journalist. I kind of married those two. And so I started with that. And what happened was while I was shopping around for that, everyone always said, I'm a huge reader, as you are, Don. I try to read a book a week. So 52 books a year is my goal. And generally I get over that. So I was like, but I always like I read everything, but I really love mystery. So I thought that's what I'm going to start with. And everybody said to me, oh, you should, write the second book in the series. And then that's better. Like publishers want, a series. But I thought, well, what if I write 2 books that nobody wants? Because I was getting my fair share of rejections, as you do. You'd get like the writing's good, but we've seen this before, or whatever, that kind of thing. So I thought I couldn't imagine not writing by that point. So I thought I would try something else. So I was actually in my lawyer's office with my husband to prepare new wills, and he was delayed in court. And while my husband was flipping through back issues of Bicycling magazine, I just started writing, like, what if I was here to inherit a house? What by the time he came, he was a good 45 minutes late, I'd written the first chapter, and that turned out to be Skeletons in the Attic, which is by far my best-selling book to date.
Mhm.
It's been picked up by a Taiwanese publisher for publication in Mandarin in 2023. It's been published in German. My German translator and her proofreader are here today, which is kind of exciting. And the whole series is being translated into German. So that's really kind of cool. Yeah. So anyway, it's been fun.
Very cool. So you end up with 2 series kind of sort of that you're writing at the same time.
Yeah. I don't write them at the exact same time. I write when I'm writing a book, that's when I'm working on. And actually the Glass Dolphin series ended at 3. So I finished that series with Where There's a Will, and it came out in November 2019. That wrapped up that storyline. And I did that because from the time I wrote it, to me, it had always been like a 3-book series. I didn't want it to be like a 20-book series. And I find that sometimes that happens with cozy mystery series in particular, but not just cozies, but is that they go beyond their best before date. Do you know what I mean? Like they just it's like book number 9 and it seems like I just read this in book number 7 or whatever. So I didn't want that. I was really happy with where I left the characters, but I do like those characters. So they, like Arabella especially, is my favorite character. She's the antique shop owner, very feisty. And so she makes an appearance in all the Marketville books, right? She has a small role, but it's a significant role. And so I still kind of keep that alive, and I make references to that series or the characters, especially in my latest book. There's quite a few nods to the Glass Dolphin series, and I have fun doing that, and I think readers probably have fun spotting those things, right? I mean, I love it. Tana French does that, and Michael Connolly does that. They both do that to perfection, and so it's not my idea. I've stolen it from them. Thanks, Tana. Appreciate it. So yeah, but it's fun. It's fun to have those crossover characters.
I can tell you as a reader, I enjoy that. I enjoy that a lot when I see that. So you've got these 2 series. They're going at the same time for the most part. I realize one has, pretty much has ended. But and you mentioned that the characters intersect. But in what other ways? And I already know this because you explained that your Glass Dolphin is more of a cozy, and it follows the cozy genre, but the Marketville is PI. Is that
Sort
correct?
of, yeah.
Yeah.
Still on the
How did
cozy
you
side.
reference it?
Yeah, I call it cold case cozy. So
okay.
it's still cozy. All my books, they're cozy because they, even the Glass Dolphin is cozy, but there are no cats, crafts, or cookie recipes. It's more like a Jessica Fletcher kind of, Murder, She Wrote sort of thing. You never saw Jessica cooking or sharing recipes or anything. And my protagonists don't, because I don't cook. So why would I make them? It makes no sense. So yeah. And even though there's an antiques angle, the antiques thing may be an important clue, and so there's some real facts in there, which I'd like to think is that when people read them, even though they're a cozy, that you're still learning something from them, right? You're still learning from those books, because coming from a journalistic background, I really research the heck out of things, and I'm not afraid to contact people and interview them to make sure that the facts are accurate, because I did that for years. Like, I talked to many people that were like in the antiques business. If you've ever watched the Antiques Roadshow, I probably interviewed every one of those experts at one time, even the Kino brothers. So, I'm not nervous about that. So, and one thing I've learned is experts love to talk about their expertise. So, so it
That
works out
makes
really well.
sense.
Yeah,
That makes
works
sense.
out really well. Yeah.
So what were some of the challenges you had in writing and having two active series going at the same time?
Yeah, I guess I never really found it that difficult, because when I was freelancing for, in order to make a living as a freelancer, you are working for a lot of publications, you have to. So I was under contract with 2 different trade publishers, and each one of those publishers had probably 20 titles to their name. These are the sort of things, like if you're an accountant, you get and you belong to the accounting association, you get their accounting magazine. If you're a mortgage professional, you get their mortgage magazine, et cetera, right? So I was always concurrently working on 5 or 6 things in the same week, and having to just sort of put that aside and go, okay, now I've got to work on this because that's due tomorrow or whatever, right? And at 4 o'clock I have to call this guy for that magazine, and so I have to so I got really used to just sort of compartmentalizing.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is, when I'm writing a book, I give myself a goal, which is to write a chapter a day. That's my goal. And if that chapter takes me an hour, because I write short chapters, this is a wonderful thing about my, I really make it easy for me. So my chapters might be 750, 800 words. They're short, sometimes longer, but they average that. And so my goal is to write a chapter a day. Now, sometimes that might take me 2 hours, and then the rest of the day I just do other things. Might be researching for another project or whatever, but I don't say, okay, I've done that, I'll do another one. No, I said I met my goal. Other days it's not quite so fluid, and it can take me 6 hours, 7 hours to get a chapter that's not even very good, but at least the next day I can go back to it and kind of edit it. You can't edit a blank page, right? So I sort of try to do that. And even yesterday, I'm working on a project now, and around 6 o'clock dinner time, my husband and I always make time for each other. I wasn't finished, so we did all, we watched some TV together. He went to bed. I came back upstairs and finished it. Like, I'm devoted. Like, if I want to do my chapter a day, I stick with that. I'm really, really tough on myself in that way. But you have to be, or you'll never get anything done, right?
Mm-hmm. I love that. So, is there any tricks that you've learned to kind of keep your story straight? How do you, your characters, their characteristics, their physical appearances? Is there anything you do to stay on top of that?
Well, I wish I could say yes. I always have a paper notebook, and I scribble in that. So when I'm working on a project, I'll, as I'm writing, I might come to a point where I know that there's like a plot hole or something. I'll make a note, page 72, need to research this or whatever. I'll make little notes. And then once I've sort of finished the first draft, I'll go back to those notes and start, addressing each one in kind. But I don't keep like a spreadsheet of, Arabella has gray eyes and auburn hair and all that. I should. I don't. It's all in my head. So all these characters are just live in my head with me. So, but it helps because I've sort of given them, I imagine them being certain celebrities or what have you, right? So when all I have to do is sort of conjure up that celebrity. So in A Hangman's Noose, there's a greedy developer comes to town, plans to build a mega box store, threatening all the indie shops. And that greedy developer, his name was Garrett Stonehaven. And in my mind, he looked like Chris Noth, who was in Law and Order and
Mhm.
Mr. Big. And so for me, I just had to conjure up Chris Noth and go, oh yeah, here's Garrett. That's what he looks like, right? So Levon Larroquette, who is Arabella's ex-husband and on again, off again relationship. In my mind, he was a young Chris Christopherson. So it was very pleasant to write about Levon. Chris being quite the dish in his day and still is, I'm sure. So I sort of give these people, so for me, I don't have to write it down because I've given them sort of a look, you know. So I mean, if by chance anything was ever to be, you know, made into a movie and somebody's asked me that, well, you know, what if they cast somebody you didn't like? I'd be like, well, it's still a movie, right? What do I care? Bring them on.
Well, I think that in itself, what you just said would be considered a trick and tip, and that was a pretty good one, honestly, because I think for those of us, you had mentioned that you were surprised to find out from your husband that not everybody has stories going in their head. I can tell you, I always have a story going on in my head, and I would love it if Charlie and Lance and Angela would tell me if they always have a story going on in their head.
I'd like to know that too.
Yeah.
And Deborah, I'd like to know if
Yeah.
Deborah has a
Yeah,
story.
Deborah and Mary and Petra, tell us. Unmute.
I don't. I have enough trouble dealing with life as I go by. I can't afford to do two things at once.
Charlie, what about you? You're a big reader.
I have vivid dreams, and they sometimes translate into my waking hours.
Okay. All right,
Plus-
Mary.
Plus, I'm old, so you
Yeah.
get
Oh, yeah, that too.
Oh, gosh. Mary, I know you're muted, but do you?
Would you have to marry Chamberlain, you mean?
Oh, you know what? I don't see who's on here. Oh my goodness, there's a lot of people on here. I don't have a list of names. Unfortunately, I only see certain folks. I was saying Mary Persh.
She might be too shy to.
Okay, that's fine. Angela, you're a writer.
I always have multiple stories going on in my head. It's
Me
quite
too.
populated.
Mine too. And sometimes it's like, oh, today I'm thinking about this one. Okay, Deborah.
Yes and no. I do a lot of the dreaming aspect, and I often have concepts that are running in my head, especially if I'm working on something. And then other times, unlike Judy, who takes it seriously, my brain seems to go on vacation if it's overloaded.
Well,
I'm retired.
you're
you gotta
retired.
watch out for Angela's
Yeah,
stories.
yes, I read one of Angela's stories and I thought it was amazing, but I've heard about a few others that she's working on. So can't wait to read those as well. Okay, so I'm not going to make anybody else chime in. You can put it in the chat if you want. And hi, Mary Chamberlain. I didn't realize you were on. I apologize.
I was late.
What?
I came in late.
Oh. Do you want to answer the question? Do you always have a story running around in your head?
No.
Judy, while we're talking about this, your voice in Before There Were Skeletons, I really like that. Did you develop that when you were walking to school, or is it something you came to for that series?
That series, as I said, it came to me in the lawyer's office, and it's just sort of grown. I love Callie. What I really like about her is that she aged. Okay, so when we meet her in Skeletons in the Attic, she's 36, and she inherits a house, and she has to go and find out what happened to her mother 30 years before. This is sort of a condition, and she's kind of a naive city slicker, I guess, that's been plopped into this sort of suburban town. And by now, in this book, she's like 42, and she's she's started her own investigating company 3 or 4 years ago. And she's gotten really, she's much more mature. Now she's got some problems for sure. Like she's not good with relationships with men because, I don't know, she's just not very good with them. But I really like her as a character. So she's fun for me to write. I would say of all my characters, she's probably the closest to who I am. She's got sort of it's not necessarily a jaded look at life, but she's somewhat cynical of things. But she still has always kept her sense of humor no matter what happens to her, right? So I think I'm sort of a bit like that. But yeah, she's fun to write. And that's the real difference between the two. That was my first A, I think. That was the difference between the two. The Glass Dolphin series is written in third person. And Marketville's written in first. And what I learned, I'd never written in first. All my short stories were written in third, is that I really prefer writing in first. There are challenges because when you're writing in first, you only know what you know. Whereas when you're writing in third, you know what different people know. And, so it's a little more challenging but in the other way, when Callie's learning something, that's when the reader's learning something. So I find that really fun. So I really enjoy writing in first, and I don't think I'd go back to third, having experimented with first.
I enjoy the storytelling that you're doing in that book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You have some interesting character names.
Yes.
And of course, the one I identify most closely with is Lance the Loser.
Poor Lance.
But they are, I do enjoy that. And it's fun read.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, that was a fun book to write, and it's gotten some good reviews. So I've been pretty lucky with it so far.
Great.
Well, Lance brought up something I wanted to ask you about, which is your characters' names. They have wonderful names.
Okay.
You said Arabella, or is it Arabelle?
Arabella.
Arabella, that's gorgeous. And then Calamity. Callie is short for Calamity. So tell us about naming your characters.
Oh yeah, well it's really fun I love naming characters. So with the case of Arabella, I don't know, that name just came to me. I don't know why, but the Carpenter, I was trying to think, I need a last name. And then I was listening to radio and the Carpenters came on. And I thought, oh, Arabella Carpenter, that works. And then Levon is from the Larroquette. Larroquette's from John Larroquette, who I'm a fan of his as far as being an actor. And Levon comes from the Elton John song Levon. So a lot of people call it Levon, but it's not. It's Levon from that song. So I got that. Emily Garland, who's also in the journalist in the Glass Dolphin series. The very first book that I read that made me think I want to be a writer when I grow up, which I always really wanted to do, even though I didn't follow that path initially, was Emily Climbs by L.M. Montgomery, who's more well known for her Anna Green Gables series. And so it's about a girl, Emily of New Moon, who gets these Jimmy books, these journals, and she writes, and she eventually becomes a journalist in 1900 Prince Edward Island. It's just I remember reading it as a kid thinking, this is what I want to do, because I was 6 or 7 years old, right? So I thought, okay, and then I was named after Judy Garland, so I was like, okay, Emily Garland, that works. So that was that. But I also so Calamity, at the time I was working for New England Antiques Journal, and we would get lots of press releases and stuff like that from auction houses and whatnot. And this Calamity Jane Carte de Viste had come up on auction and sold for some crazy amount of money. And I thought, Calamity, that would be such a great name, because I could call her Callie, but it's a great name because it sort of conjures up somebody that doesn't maybe have their life completely under control. So that's how I got, and then first she was going to be Calamity Barnes, but then I thought, I want something a little more lengthy. So I kind of added a stable on there. But another great way to do character naming is I always watch the end credits of TV and movie, always. And it really annoys me when they make them small and you can't read them, or they buzz through them, because you can get some great names from that. I don't like Denham Hopkins, who's in Before There Were Skeletons. If you watch Yellowstone, there's a character in there that that his real name is Denim. I know I can't remember what it is, but it's Denim something. And I remember thinking, Denim, that would be such a great name for a character. So, well, he's a guy, Denim's a girl, but it could be either way, right? And so I really liked that. So yeah, so I've that's one way. And then I also especially for before there were skeletons, I'm an owner of a golden retriever, and I've had golden retrievers my whole life. And so I support golden rescue in whatever way I can. So in this case, they had a silent auction, and I did a name the character. So the person that won, her name was Juanetta Doucette Goodman. She wanted the character be named after her daughter-in-law, Kate Goodman. So I named a character Kate Goodman, but then I also managed to put in a Juanetta and a Lindsay Doucette, because Kate Goodman's maiden name was Lindsay. So I was able to get all kinds of names from this one person that won the silent auction bid. And so it was great, because I got character names, and Golden Rescue got some money, and Kate and Juanetta have a little bit of claim to fame, right? So it works for everybody.
Oh, I think that's great. That's a good story. I like that idea. I mean, I think it's something that other authors, might possibly mimic, and because I think it's great. And we have had some authors, whether it's in Sisters in Crime Atlanta or that have been on the program, that have said that they've had auctions to name.
Oh yeah, a lot of authors do it. It's
Yeah.
a really easy way to give back. I don't know, Deborah, have you ever done it? Done a name the character thing? I don't know where she.
Yes, not only have I done it, there is a woman who appears in every single book, because every time I'm on Murder at the Magic City, which is every few years, she buys it. And she has now Deborah Holtz, and she does it for a lot of authors. In fact, the first time I was in Malice, and I was actually moderating, she had just bored me earlier. All of a sudden, I'm reading everybody's book, and there's Deb Holt, Debbie Holt. These people had all been at some time in the last 2-3 years. She had bought everybody except one. And she says she has been a pole sitter, she has been a victim, and now she hands you a card with 5 different versions of her name you can use.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, well,
So-
Sarah Burns like that. Sarah Byrne bid on one of my books earlier on at VoucherCon, and she's from Australia. And I've heard that she's bid on a number of books. So Sarah Burns been a number of, I think she was a cop in my book, but I don't know where she was. It is fun. It's a good way of giving back, and without really costing you anything, right? And you just have to let people know, I know I have one character in the Glass Dolphin book, Michelle Ellis, and my one of my very, very good friends, that was her maiden name, Ellis, and her first name is Michelle. And she always said, when you get published, I want a character named after me. So I did, but after she goes, well, I wanted a nice character. I said, oh, well, you should have specified. It's too late now. No, I'm not making any promises that you're not going to be the murder victim or anything like that, or like some horrible person. I said, I could have made you a tramp. I didn't make you a tramp. So.
So we're doing great on time, but we are getting close to wrapping up. So one thing I definitely want to chat with you about is, and you've already brought this up in a sense, that you have a good business sense. And from your previous career. And that's one thing I noticed when I was looking, doing some research on you. You have a fantastic website.
Thank you.
And it's very thoughtful. And I can tell that you take the business of writing and being a writer very seriously. And you're also very involved in a lot of writing organizations. And so tell us a little bit, I know we've already kind of talked about it, but tell us a little bit more about that. We touched on it, but just how do you do it?
Yeah,
you do it all yourself, or?
So the website, my first website was very rudimentary. And then when I started becoming a little bit more accomplished, I hired the web developer for New England Antiques Journal at the time. She did it for me, and she did a great job. But I said to her, I want to make sure it's something I can keep up with and do myself. I don't want to have to send it and wait a week, or like, I'm very impatient. I want to do it right away. So once she set up the bones of it, and I told her what I wanted the carousel and all this kind of thing. She set all of that up, which was great. I don't know if you've noticed on my homepage, I've also mentioned that we have now a German website that my translator Petra, her husband he's really good at that stuff. So he's developed a phenomenal German website. Now I can't really read it, but anyway, it's beautiful. But I put a link to that on the homepage. So now I have two really nice websites. So yeah. And as far as associations, yeah, I'm a huge believer. I joined Sisters in Crime and Crime Writers of Canada before ever being published. I think it's really important to support organizations like that. If you're, I love mystery and I want to support crime fiction and nonfiction writers. And so to me, that was important. And I mean, I would say you would get much more out of an organization than you might expect, right? There are so many opportunities, networking things, like certainly with Sisters in Crime, whenever I've gone to a conference, they've always had some kind of everybody get together for lunch or dinner or drinks or something. And there's always some sort of a seminar ahead of time, or like there's lots of benefits to belonging for a pretty nominal fee. And Crime Writers of Canada, I mean, I'm Canadian, I have to support that national association. And I was on the board for 5 years. I actually just left the board in June. I was the chair for 2 years. So that was a tremendous honor and a lot of work because, as you know, it's all volunteer. It's all, these associations are all run by volunteers. And so, yeah, it was almost sometimes felt like a bit of a full-time job. Like if I had known when I said, yes, I would be the chair, because they asked if I would after being a regional representative for 2 years. And I said, yes, I never dreamed that COVID would hit. Basically, when I took over, I was like, come on, so that was a bit of a challenge navigating, giving member benefit when suddenly everything that we had done as a benefit was sort of not there anymore, like, supporting book events and that kind of thing. It was quite the challenge. But anyway, it's a fabulous experience. I say to anybody, you don't have to be a writer. You can start as a reader and you can stay as a reader, but belonging to these associations will give you so much back many benefits that you would never expect.
And one thing we haven't talked about, and I want to make sure we get it in, is Superior Shores Press. Tell us about that.
So that is my own publishing imprint. So originally my book, my first series was picked up by Barking Rain Press, which was a Mystery Writer of America approved publisher out of Oregon. They were wonderful, but unfortunately the owner felt that she had to close it down for a variety of personal reasons. So the first 2 books were published by her, and she gave us lots of time. She paid us all our royalties. It was all very handled beautifully. But anyway, basically orphaned, right? Nobody's going to pick up the 3rd book in the series, which I'd already really wanted to finish that series. At the same time, the Margaretville series had been picked up by a publisher in Kelowna, British Columbia. And that owner ended up getting quite ill, and so divested herself of all her authors. So basically I'd gone from having 2 publishers, which I wanted because I thought, well, you always hear these people being orphaned, publishers sell or close or merge or whatever. And I know Deborah's been in the orphaned situation. And so I thought, if I have 2 publishers, that won't happen. Well, guess what it did? I got orphaned twice. So I thought, I don't want to go to get a 3rd publisher only to have the same thing happen. And I do have a good business sense. And I did, when I was an editor for magazines, a lot of it's not just editing, like you're hiring the freelance content, you're paying the people, you have a budget, like there's lots of stuff behind the scenes. That's like the accounting side. So I thought, I'm going to start my own press. So on Lake Superior Shores Press, have my little logo, which is basically Lake Superior. So that was good. But then I thought I want people to understand that it's not just, a hobby or whatever. I want it to be like legitimate. But I don't want it so legitimate that I'm certainly taking on, other authors and all of that. So that's how the anthology thing came up. It was a way of paying back my earlier excitement, but also giving the press some legitimacy. And it's worked out really well. The 3 anthologies are consistently selling well. And the one actually had a Derringer nod and won a Police Writers Association award and was long listed for a Silver Falchion award. So, it's been good. And I've had people say, are you going to do a 4th one? And I've taken a gap year. I did 1 a year starting 2019. And I've taken a gap year, and I probably will do another one, but not right this minute, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I mean, I do all the editing, the reading, the proofreading, the formatting. Only at the very end do I bring somebody in to make sure that I haven't screwed up the proofreading, but otherwise I do everything myself. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, I imagine so. And so you said that, folks have asked you if you're going to do a 4th anthology. And one thing I want to mention is for the Glass Dolphin series, you ended at 3. And in your mind, that was what you were going to do. You were going to write 3. And I'm curious if that was also your plan with Marketville, was to only write 3, but yet.
Marketville, I've always thought as a 6-book series, and I don't know why that is, but having finished the 4th book, I have an idea for book 5. I'm working on a different project right now, so it's a little bit shelved, but I do have an idea for book 5, which is sort of mulling around in my brain. So we'll see. Really, that Before There Were Skeletons, it had started off as being a prequel, taking place in 1978 from Callie's mother's point of view, because Callie's mom is, she dropped out of school to have Callie when she was 17. And I wrote like 75 pages of it and in Abigail's voice, and I just couldn't get it. And so I finally thought, no, I'm going to go and make it present day and find a way to bring that 1978 side of things to present day. And as soon as I started writing in Callie's voice, it just came to me. But the 50 to 75 pages, I didn't find it a waste, because I really got to know Abigail, really got to know who she was. So even though a lot of who she was doesn't really make it into the book, it might in the future, right? Because I got some of it, but now I really understand who she was as a young girl.
So we are getting very close to our hour.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time. Before we go, is there any, and you said you're an avid reader and you try to read a book a week. So is there a book you recommend that you read recently that you're like, this was great and everyone should get it off the shelf and read it?
So, and neither one is really a mystery, but 2, I'm currently reading the 3rd book, The Winners in the Beartown series by Frederick Bachman. It's like 700 pages, so it's going to take me a while, but it's like, he is just absolutely a brilliant writer, and I cannot say enough about that series. And then the other one that I just finished reading was The Maid by Nina Prouse, which I just absolutely loved. I loved everything about it. So neither one are mysteries, but they're both phenomenal reads. So I would highly recommend those. And if I was going to recommend a mystery author, there's so many. Like, I read a lot. I'm a big fan of John Sanford, for instance, but I always recommend Tana French. You can't go wrong with her Dublin Murder series. It's just such a good series. So some of the books are a bit older now, but I highly recommend her. The Maid and the Beartown series.
Well, thank you very much. And again, this has been wonderful. I have enjoyed it. You are very interesting and very much a professional who takes writing seriously. And I love that. And I want to thank everybody for spending your Saturday morning with us. And I hope you have great plans for the weekend and that you enjoy the rest of your day. And We are in limbo for December, as far as whether or not we'll have an off the shelf, just because it's the holidays and it's hard to schedule a time that works for folks. So we might table it, but we'll be in touch soon with plans for 2023. And also the Sisters in Crime Atlanta website is forthcoming soon. Right, Angela? So that'll be a good way for us to communicate with everybody once we get that off the ground. But thank
Now,
you
will
very
there
much.
be a link to this, Dawn, like somewhere? Like
Yes.
because
So
I like to include those.
absolutely. So Angela will get this downloaded and we'll get it on our YouTube channel. She'll send the link. And what I'll do, because right now we're really pretty much just communicating with everybody on Facebook, if they're not a member of our chapter, where we can send them an email. So we'll put it on the Facebook page linked to this event. And I'll send you an email when that's been done, so you know to go grab
That's
it.
great, because on my website, on the about, I have like my little bio, and then after my bio, I have enough about me, here's more about me, and then I have all my podcasts, and with even how long they are, so people know, okay, I'm in it for an hour, I'm in it for 10 minutes, whatever, right? So with a link, so that way it's always there.
And great idea. And again, it just shows how on top of things you are when it comes to being a professional writer. So,
Thank you.
all
Thanks,
right.
Thank you so
Judy.
much for having me. It was awesome.
Thank you for
Thank you, Judy.
agreeing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.